Hello, once again, everybody. Trying to get a couple of videos done at home so I can, get them transferred over at Starbucks, which is opening in 5 minutes. This is going to be seven things that I have found are an issue with staffing agencies, and not so much the agencies, but the jobs that they post. So a few of my relatives have requested that I do the staffing agency thing. This wouldn't be the first time I've tried it, but conventional job applying hasn't really gotten anywhere, so I decided to entertain the idea, and just in a few days of doing it, these are 7 things that I've discovered. Yes, that mug does look like a knit sweater. It is pretty neat. I'm sure if my wife knew I still had this, she would want it, but it's mine. Keeping it. I did get the info for a couple of local staffing agencies. I have primarily looked at Express Employment. I also have KP Staffing here, as well as a few others that my father sent me. They all have very similar job listings. I'm also with Adecco. Adecco does actually have some office postings, and they're who I got the Citigroup posting through, and that should be starting in October. It's just I need something sooner, really. But it might come down to trying to just make it to that. I don't know. But anyway, issues I've noticed with staffing jobs. No order. These are just 7 things. It's just a list. Number 1, so back in the day, there would have been all kinds of jobs you could have gotten with a staffing agency. It would have been as simple as kind of going there, letting them know what you're looking for, them getting you the interview, and then garnishing your pay for a while to cover their fee. It might still kind of work that way. They're kind of more ambiguous about it, but these days, when you look, 90% of the listings are warehouse or manufacturer jobs. If that's kind of what you're looking for, that's great. It's a great place to find those things. Most of these things pay between, 18 and 20 bucks. Some of them are 16 or so an hour, but the general salary is between 18 and 20 bucks an hour, which is sort of the minimum you need to make in today's environment. But if, you're already kind of used up and you have, musculoskeletal injuries and things like that, excuse me, then a warehouse environment might not be what you're looking for. So that can be kind of an issue. There are a few office listings here and there, but they're really few and far between. So kind of first issue, warehouse work isn't exactly what I'm looking for right now, even though I've already done it. But the stuff, especially closer to home, we'll get into that later, that's what's coming up. Number 2, of all those jobs, 90% of those jobs require you to be able to operate a forklift, either a sitting or standing forklift, not a walking stack. Apparently, walking stacks aren't really used anywhere other than the retail and grocery industries. And this is not like, hey, it's not really necessary. There are a couple of those, like we'd prefer it, but it's not really necessary. There are 1 or 2 of those listings. But most of them require you to be able to operate a forklift going in. They're not necessarily willing to train you. You need to know that going in. So, if you don't know that going in and you don't have proof of the certification, then that is going to really limit the number of things that you can apply for. So again, I'd say 90% of those listings require you to use a forklift. 90% of the warehouse listings, you can kind of try and hunt through all the customer service stuff they have, but Okay, number 3. Most of these job listings are, even the customer service ones, are in some industrial park. They're not particularly close to home, at least in my case. Something like that really can eat into your hourly, and I think a lot of people don't calculate that when they're looking for a job. If you are having to drive half an hour one way and half an hour back, that's technically, how many days do you work a month? If you're working 5 days a week, that's 20 hours, essentially. So that's a whole part-time work week you're not getting paid for. Okay? I realize you have to get to work, but that's your time, that's your fuel, that's maintenance on your vehicle, wear and tear on your vehicle, and you're not getting paid for that. If you just cut that in half, if you were a 15-minute trip one way, so a half-hour round trip, that's at least cutting it down to 10 hours a month that you're not getting paid for. The closer to home you are to work, the more money overall you are going to make, and that is very important in this day and age, which is, I think, a big reason why people really enjoyed doing remote work when more of it was available. That's kind of another thing. Remote work is really starting to disappear. They're really running return to office, RTO, on a lot of that. I read recently that Walmart had a bunch of remote workers, and they just RTO'd all of them, and if you couldn't RTO, they let you go. So, or if you couldn't RTO to a warehouse or on-site customer service center, they tried to find a spot for you at a store, which just doesn't pay as much. It's interesting because my understanding was Obama made Walmart go up to $15 an hour. And I have a couple of friends who were making that. But if you look at the listings now, they're starting to come back down, like $14.35, $14.50, things like that. Just a little bit of a segue there. They're just not close to home. They're usually in some seedy industrial park. At least many of these that I'm looking at as far as the listings go are during the day, so you wouldn't really be stuck too many of these at night. Some of them are overnight, but most of these are during the day. Number 4, many of them, not as many as with Adecco. Adecco is almost all temp to hire, but many of these with these other agencies are also temp to hire. In my mind, that can be really nerve-wracking because you basically have to save all of your extra money because you don't always know when the contract's going to end, and then when the contract does end, what are you going to do? You could get on permanently, but you can't count on that. My cousin actually took a temp to hire job more or less right out of college. He worked a couple other jobs after that, but pretty quickly out of college he took a temp to hire job. I'm not going to tell you where, but with a very big company, very well-known company, and he actually did go permanent, and he's been there ever since. So it can certainly work out, but you cannot count on it working out. That is an if, and that if really bothers me. I would be in fear the whole time of just like, what do I do when this is over, you know? And I would be worried that that would affect my performance. Okay, number 5. Even though you can apply on the staffing agency site for a lot of these positions, in the literature of the job, they still need you to go to their office. For me, their office is not close. I live in the Arlington area, and this is in like central Fort Worth, which again can take half an hour, 45 minutes to get to, and that's just further cutting into my resources. You know, and I don't have many of them right now. Right now, my car is not even insured or registered, so it's a real risk for me to just go anywhere right at the moment. So just keep that in mind. I would call them first and just kind of explain your situation and see if you can just work everything out over the phone. If it's impossible for them to do that, then you got to go. But, you know, that's... You're not guaranteed to get hired for any of these just going through the staffing agency. So, you know, it's a lot to commit to. But it would be nice to make $18 an hour instead of $10 working at McDonald's. Number 6, in a lot of the literature, it's lots of, you need to work overtime if it's required. You need to be able to work a flexible schedule. You must come in if asked to come in for extra time. And when I start seeing things like that, that says we own you and we don't care about your work-to-life balance. I'm sorry, but you know, that is not lazy, and that is not that's not unappreciative of a job. That is simply like, I am done with my work. Leave me alone. It is my day off. Leave me alone. That's how I've always felt about work. I worked for Dish Network for a while, and they had mandatory. First, it started as mandatory overtime. Okay, so you needed to do an additional 4 hours, another part-time day during your week. Okay, so the way I solved that initially when it was just mandatory overtime was I just stayed an extra hour on my shift. I worked overnight. I usually got off at like 6 in the morning. So when we were in mandatory overtime half the year, I think it was, or at least a quarter of the year, if any of you worked for Dish Network in the early 2000s, just remind me of how that worked. I believe it was a quarter of the year. So during that quarter, I would literally just stay an extra hour on 4 of my shifts. And then the last day of my week, if I wasn't working a 4x10, I was younger then, so I tried to work a 4x10 as much as I could, but if I was working a 4x10, it'd be every day. So, you know, basically they're 12 hours. Because, you know, you don't get paid for lunch anymore, and you have to work it at the end. If I was working just a standard 8-hour plus 1 because of the lunch thing shift, you know, you'd be there a total of 10, 4 days of the week, and then your last day you could go home on time. And even though I didn't like doing that, it worked out okay. But then they turned it into mandatory 6th day, and they would schedule 4 hours of overtime on one of your days off, and you had no choice in it. And it was usually during the prime real estate of the day, like 2 in the afternoon to like 6 or something like that. Just the last block of time that you would want to work, they would make you work that. It was really terrible because you couldn't plan anything, and a lot of people didn't have days off together, so there was literally no time to decompress at all. And you guys might say, well, it's only 4 hours, but you know, if your days off are separated and everything, you still have to do the getting ready, you still have to do the driving there, You know, it was all the way across town, so it was about a half hour, 45 minute, you know, round trip for me. So another 45 minutes of time I'm not getting paid for during the week. You are getting paid for the time, but sometimes they would also send you home early during other parts of the week if, you know, things got slow. So, you know, you would basically not make overtime pay sometimes. And, you know, a lot of the time when you came in for that 6th day, you were required to work another split. So basically, if you were a tech agent, you'd come in for that 4 hours and do sales, and then, you know, have crappy numbers because sales isn't something that you do, you know. Or if you were a sales agent, you come in for that 6th day, you'd do tech. And sales, basically the rule was you had to do what came in on your split usually, unless you were very busy. So sometimes during the week you would have to do a sales call anyway, or a sales agent would have to do a tech call, but it was weird to have to do it 4 hours in a row. Sorry for that segue there, but yeah, when you start seeing terms like this, you need to really think about how much of your life you want to give that job. And again, they can do sketchy little things to make sure that you're not really making overtime pay, you know. Number 7. There's something that people have finally kind of come to realize in today's working environment, and that is, and this is going to sound like, again, you don't appreciate the job, man. No, it has nothing to do with that. It is simply the way it is, and you can either ignore it or not. And that is, hard work equals more work. It's really what it comes down to. And not necessarily more overtime. Just, we're going to cram more work into you during your shift, okay? So all of these staffing agency ads advertise, you know, we need hard workers. And basically, I just read there, we're going to pile massive amounts of work on you, probably make you do 2 or 3 people's jobs total without trying to give you more pay for it or the appropriate time. So I suspect that a lot of these staffing jobs are on these sites because, you know, people have washed out of their probation or didn't attempt to hire well, or something like that, or they're just having trouble filling the position because really it isn't an ideal job. All right, if people are desperate in this day and age and they need some work and all that, but at the same time, you know, you really have to think about, you know, and especially since most of us are working more than one job, we need time to work that other job, right? Because they're probably not going to give you sufficient overtime at this one. So I have a telecom job that I'd need to work on my days off anyway. So that was 7 things that I've noticed are issues about staffing jobs. I'm probably going to be going over to the Starbucks here in a little bit, so you guys should be able to see these videos hopefully today. I don't think I'll need to edit them heavily. Anyway, thanks for sticking to the end if you did. Goemon Ronin signing out.